Okay, welcome everybody. It's really good to see that you're here, and I hope that you're all adjusting okay. So I'm recording this just to post for you because we're going to be talking about a lot. I'll be talking quite a bit, sorry. Try not to. And I'll also post some notes for this online that may be helpful for you because we're going to go over a lot of information about groups and how groups function. But before we do that, so you have due tonight is your communication activity plan. So your plan for something that will kind of help people to exercise nonverbal cues. Let me make a note to myself. I need to post an example if that might be helpful. So just post that by midnight. If you have questions about that, totally feel free to email me. And if you have questions along the way here, just, unmute yourself and say, hey, Kristen, I have a question. Feel free to stop me at any point. Yeah, so the guidelines for the mediated communication or the communication activity plan guides is on iLearn under this week. I moved it down so it's easier to see. Okay, so for the last class, I asked you to read self-disclosure in social media article, and then also what happened when I confronted my cruelest troll. And there's a link that if you would like to listen to it, I don't know if we'll have time in class, but after class, there's like a 20-minute audio piece in which Lindy West talks to the person who created that account based on her father who had passed away. So you can hear them having their conversation. So I asked you all to think about scenarios in which computer mediated communication maybe went too far or something that really benefited people. And I would say right now, probably there's a lot more benefits than there have been in the past. But what were some examples that you thought of that either computer mediated communication went too far and was harmful, or if it was beneficial? Anybody? Oh, okay. So I'll repeat myself. Did anybody have any examples from their last journal, Journal 17, in which they saw benefits of online or computer mediated communication or a situation in which it was harmful?
Question was actually about the communication activity plan.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
So I was working on it, and my idea was to kind of like create a Kahoot. That was going to be the activity.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't know, does this assignment require me to actually create that Kahoot? Do you want that, or do you just want the kind of like idea of it?
I'd say like the idea, and then if you were to create a Kahoot, maybe what you could do is type out what like the questions would be.
Okay.
And some of like the options. So
Okay.
I mean, if you did want to go through and create one, you could just send me a link or like include a link to it in the document.
Okay, I feel like I might do that. It might help with like get organized.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would totally be good because then I can like run through it and see how it works.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what were some examples that you guys found in terms of how like online communication has been positive or negative?
Hi. So, for me, I just started to use the articles as an example because that was the most extreme case that I've heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Besides celebrity type feuds, I felt like this one was more personal because even though like she was kind of a social media figure, like she posted pretty frequently on social media, it's like still showed like oh that like even an average person can get like very like attacked once the screen is in place and then it's not just like famous people who are like getting all the attention like and like the backlash from it and I thought of like that the fact like that someone would actually like take the time and go through like an account. I don't think the person like was like I think that having like the screen there they don't have to like look into the person's eyes and like say that directly to them. And
Mm-hmm.
so like when they're not reading all the nonverbal stuff because they're just typing it in, they're willing to like go like the extra mile. And then like the psychology experiment that was one of the other articles was saying like how it's bi-directional. So like this is a case where like the extreme was like negative, but like that's not always the result that happens. And like right now, I see a lot of positive things for people who are posting like chain reactions, like oh, like if you see a dog, post a dog, and like spreading like joy that type of way. So I think that the screen just like adds that like extra element like oh when you take out the nonverbal cues that like is a core part of like human communication then it just like gets supplemented like with what you're trying to say becomes more of like dramatically stated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it kind of amplifies whatever you're kind of like leaning towards, right? So it could amplify positive things and amplify negative things. Yeah. And actually in the articles for today, it discusses that like having an ability to make eye contact with somebody online changes that person's behavior, and they're less likely to engage in negative attacks if they have to see the other person and have to look at their eyes, which is, I think, a really interesting thing. Um, did other people think of any examples?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I guess just based off me, sorry, just knowing trolls. I was actually just reading the one about the lady who said that a troll went as far as to pose as her dead dad. But I guess your question was like, what are ways that we see
Yeah,
online?
like have you ever like witnessed any? Like if any people are in like gaming communities, I know sometimes those can get really intense.
Hmm.
um and especially around like gender, but I don't know like if you guys have seen other examples in your own life of online groups or even social media or whatnot that people either
Okay,
engage in really positive things or engage in really negative things.
right. I believe yes. Twitter for sure, and like Facebook and stuff, depending on who you follow. But
Hmm.
like a lot of pages, or there's a lot of trolls on there too that are just like super negative, and like somebody will post something like super nice, like a girl like post like a nice picture, and somebody will just come out at random and say something like that's wrong about it, and everybody's like, oh, and then everybody's like posting memes like, oh shit, like somebody said it. It's like it's just endless. But then there is that positive side where people are like doing or trying to promote positive stuff too. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's my experience at least.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the online audience kind of like encourage people to
Mhm.
continue what they're already doing for that, right?
Right. And
Positive.
sometimes people are ruthless though, like troll wise. Yeah. You like look and you're like, damn, why would you say that? But at the same time, it's like you said, it's non-confrontational. Like if somebody was right there, they wouldn't be like, your mom's a, like anything. They wouldn't say that. But it's because there is no screen. They have the freedom to type and not really feel it because it's just like words technically. But cyberbullying leads to fucking suicide in the US so much. So,
Mhm.
yikes.
And
I
I don't
think
know.
another,
Yes, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say I think another problem could be like fan bases in general for like celebrities more so. They could be really loving towards each other, but they could also be very vulgar towards other groups as well, and just like tear them apart.
Yeah, so they can really like quickly be mobilized to attack somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
even if it's always what the person wants, but that's just how they defend themselves and the person.
that's very true. Yeah, they get very, yeah, that's true. It's very like a defensive kind of thing. Like, I want to protect this person, so I'm going to attack you. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like some of you had presented on some of the Kardashian issues, the multiple ones in class. Are any of you like up to date? Because I think we're some of the sisters, like Courtney and Kim, got in some big fight recently, like on their show, like a physical
Sheesh.
altercation. So yeah, I think in that, like seeing people's reaction online, because I think Courtney wanted to step back from their show and saying, well, I want to focus on my children, and then all of the fans for like Kim were very much attacking her for that, right? So it can easily kind of, it's like a tide, right? And the tide can easily turn against people, and be like very vicious. Okay. So I have some notes on the article for today, the study of anonymity and behavior. So if you have any thoughts along the way, please verbally jump in because I'm looking at my notes at the same time. So this kind of pulled in some other information on anonymity. Oh, you know what? Something I had linked on here before, but it's a little bit older, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. But have any of you had any experience with Yik Yak when that was a thing a few years ago?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
So this was like an app that was out there, and it was based on like high school campuses or college campuses because it was based on a small like 2-mile radius location, and
Mhm.
it was completely anonymous, and so people could post anything and everything on there, and they did not have to say who they were. And it got vicious pretty quickly, and even on
Yeah.
our campus, right? I had a student who a lot of people started posting that her boyfriend was cheating on her and she was dumb and didn't know it and like was attacking her, and she became suicidal, right?
Oh.
So I think like all the negative things that had happened around that. Did any of you guys like see that when it was around?
No, what I saw was a lot of people trying to like hook up. They're like, yo, if you're like down, meet me like by Yarrow. It's like, whoa. But that was my freshman year though, so that was like 2014.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not a lot of violent threats, just a lot of horny
Interesting.
teenagers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I think because of so many issues that had come up around that, like the app like just kind of crashed and burned, right? So people did not use that anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so getting back to the study, the like overview of several studies. So this started out by discussing Philip Zimbardo. So if any of you are familiar with the Stanford prison experiment, he is the person who did that one. And so in this experiment that he did in 1969 was he took different female students, and some of them he put in like official looking lab coats, some with just like with name tags and no hoods, and some of them with these like cloaks, right? These identity concealing hoods. And he told them that they needed to give an electric shock to somebody else, right? they were not actually electric shocking them. Like it was all just to see what their choices would be. And he found that the people who were hooded were twice as likely to say, yes, I'll give this person electric shock, rather than people who were not concealed. And they kind of said, oh, okay, you asked me to do it. I'll, I'm not going to do it. Right. But people with hoods were more willing to go ahead and engage in this like dangerous behavior because they felt like there were not consequences, right? Potentially. So that kind of revealed this potential link between anonymity and abusive behavior, right? That people, it has been shown that they tend to act more aggressively or rudely or even engage in illegal behavior more so when their faces and names are hidden. So think about like when people go out wearing masks, right? If they go to an event and they're wearing costumes or masks, they're going to behave differently than if they were not wearing a costume. And, when people commit crimes, usually they're wearing a mask of some sort. So that it has kind of that similar effect. But then it also discusses how, Mike, are you getting like a safety mask? So hopefully if you guys go out, you are wearing safety masks right now. Okay, so the internet also can offer positive opportunities, right? So in some of the other articles we looked at self-disclosure. So people may feel safer sharing really personal information with others because they're kind of like, well, I don't know this person. There's not going to be any negative, they're not like a friend who's going to judge me. This is somebody I don't know. So people feel actually more comfortable doing that. And then, so anonymity can reveal personal traits that face-to-face interactions may hide, right? So what they it seems to happen in most of these studies is that people who, people will kind of follow whatever the norms of the group are typically. So that if the norm of a group is to encourage people in a very positive way, generally people will kind of follow along with that, right? If the norms of the group are for people to be kind of negative, to egg each other on, to attack others, then people will follow along with that. So like that kind of seems to have more of an influence on behavior more so than assuming everybody who's anonymous is going to be negative or everybody who's anonymous is going to be positive. So you guys kind of gave a couple of examples, but what have you noticed? Are there groups that you are a part of online or, yeah, I'd say like in any version online, in which people like always kind of share really positive things, and that seems to be more of like kind of the tone of the group? Or are you part of any groups that tend to have very negative reactions and that kind of snowballs? So we looked at Twitter. What are some other groups that you're a part of that you've seen that?
You mean like strictly online, or?
I would say, well, I mean, if you have any like real life examples, that would be perfectly
Well, like
fine, but we're looking online.
I'm an essential worker now because I was working at PF Chang's, but I got a new job.
Mm-hmm.
And we do the social distancing, like this 6 feet apart and only allowing like 3 people in at a time in our store. So, I mean, it's positive in a way as far as like trying to decrease the spread as people are trying to still interact with people. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, and then you have people coming in being, stressed out too,
mhm,
right? So if everybody's kind of stressed out, that can make everybody else more stressed out, right?
right. And they come to just talk, because it's their way of like getting out and still being able to have that personal interaction instead of just be at home and shelter in place all day. So,
Mhm.
but it's dangerous. So it's at the same time, it's like, but
Yeah, people are kind of finding public spaces to go and just like chit chat, and they should not be doing that, right? Chit
mhm.
chatting, you could spread that through talking.
Yeah. they miss it. Yeah, but it's like
Yeah. Have any of you like thought of any other like groups that you're part of, maybe online, where you have seen people influence like others' behavior by saying positive things or by saying negative things?
Well, someone kind of gave the example earlier of like Facebook.
Mhm.
Not that I'm necessarily part of a Facebook group or anything like that, but I've had to kind of like remove friends, or there's this like feature on Facebook where you can unfollow them, so that
Mhm.
way like you don't see their posts, or you
Mhm.
don't have to unfriend them, but you just don't see what they post. And I've had to do that before, just because some of the things that they would post would be things that would kind of like upset me and not really bring, I don't know, it wouldn't bring positive things to me. It would kind of just make me upset and bring negative energy to me. So
Mhm.
I've had to do things like that, where just kind of unfollowing certain people or making it to where I can't see what they're post or what they're saying or things like that.
Yeah. Because then we may feel like a tendency to want to fight with them and to
Yeah,
say something back, and yeah.
yeah. My uncle, he like with politics, for example, that's one thing, right? And then I personally have different views than a few of my family members, and they are aware of that, you know, and they're very vocal about their views. And then I don't personally think that those views are right, and I voiced my opinion about that, and so we just kind of butt heads. And so I just found it better for us to just kind of not have each other on platforms like that, where we're not talking about those things, and just keep it to being family rather than like political.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know how I can handle it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that can be a good, because people share things online, you know, like with the self-disclosure that they would normally not say face to face as much, right?
Hmm.
People will share very controversial views, or really kind of negative or derogatory views, especially about politics, because they kind of feel like they want to fit in with other people that they're friends with, or they feel encouraged by what other people are posting. Or emboldened by that. So I think that's a totally healthy thing. Sometimes you just have to say, if we were hanging out and having dinner as a family, this probably would not normally come up. So maybe it's better that I don't know this about you. Right.
Yeah.
So like I often, I'm not friends with a lot of people I work with in different workplaces that I've been at, because I didn't want to see them in a negative way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I online am a part of like several cooking groups. So like bread baking, I've been for a while, and then also some other like cooking groups. And I see that those generally tend to be a lot more positive, because people will post something that they made and everybody's like, wow, that looks great. Good job. Here's some tips, or could you share your recipe? And so those tend to be more positive than other groups that I've been a part of. So, okay, so and if there's anything you want to add, guys, just totally jump in verbally.
I was just gonna say I've never thought
Oh,
of it that way, to be honest. Because usually, like
mm-hmm.
when I work with people, I don't know if it's just because like I'm like younger, but like when I work with people, I like to get to know them only because like it makes working a lot easier. You're not like, oh hey stranger every day, It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like a hey, we're on the same team, so I gotta like get to know you in a sense. But
So you feel more personal connection to them that way.
most of the time, but I do agree like to keep it separate, but I don't know. That's just an interesting way of thinking about like not wanting to see them negatively, because you do get certain vibes with coworkers. You're just like, oh, hey, but then there's other people that are like, hey, like, what's up, dude? So there's like different connections between.
Yeah, and like you could and like have an interaction with somebody normally in person, that's one way, but online they have a very different personality.
Yeah, true.
So I mean, and we're all different. Like I'm somebody who does kind of like to have a separation between personal life and professional life. That's why I'm not friends with a lot of students online. Because I respect you all and I respect your privacy, and I don't want you to see things. I don't post anything crazy, but I don't want people to see you in a negative way. But anyway, okay. So they gave some examples also in the piece of people who had attempted suicide, and they found that if it was especially like in the dark, if there were large groups of people, sometimes people would cheer them on to do very negative things. And so I thought about, and it's really kind of dark, but it's, you know, out there, that people who were, there's several women, like young women, who have been prosecuted and sentenced to prison because they encouraged their boyfriend at the time to kill himself, and like to the point where they really literally like pushed him through messaging to do that. So that kind of like influence of other people really can affect um, partners, right? You can affect people in a positive way and say, hey, you know what, you know, I'm thinking about your safety and all that. But some people, like, it can really take this really like negative turn. And 4chan is another example of really negative online behavior, like very negative behavior. Okay. So they said kind of the best way to deal with these bad group norms, if you find them online, is to kind of challenge them and to kind of take a different tack, right? So I think some of you had mentioned people online who are now asking other people to post really positive things, or to post good pictures, or to post, you know, something to kind of change the narrative, because it can get, especially with people are being, you know, so scared and in such risk right now, there can be a lot of like negative posting. And if the news is something that's really stressing you out, like just take a step back. You don't have to constantly check it, right? Especially right now. I talked about eye contact. So if people have an opportunity to see one another in their online interactions, like actually see them face to face, see their eyes, they tend to be less likely to engage in negative behavior. So that could be a positive thing. And they said that positive behavior can have a positive spiral effect, right? So good deeds that are online can beget other good deeds. So kind of like paying things forward. If people see examples of people doing positive things, they will be more likely to be helpful and do positive things, right? Okay. So let's look at group dynamics. So jump in at any point, because I apologize if I'm going to speak at length. I will share my screen with you in a minute to share to show you some kind of like graphics that I normally would be drawing on the board, but I think I have a board here. I need to just figure out how to set it up so you guys can see it well. Okay, so group dynamics. So I think this online group influence can lead well into our discussion of group dynamics, right? So how do groups work? So group dynamics really kind of influence people's interpersonal communication, and the tendency to join with others in groups is kind of maybe the most important characteristic that humans have, right? Because these groups that we are in, and most of us are actually could be considered part of multiple groups, really imprint on us and influence our behavior and our coping mechanisms, our kind of our social norms in many, many ways, right? So there are people who like to be very solitary, you know, people who like to kind of go off into the wilderness and live on their own. But generally that is kind of not the norm. That is not super common. Most people prefer to live in some group, right? And so a lot of you are probably finding this right now, that being physically isolated from most people that you're used to interacting with can be very stressful, right? Are any of you finding, we kind of talked about this in our last get together, but are any of you finding stress in not being able to physically get together with people that you normally hang out with?
I personally just miss like
Josh,
everyday
yeah.
life.
Uh-huh.
I said I personally just miss like everyday life, like kind of going to work and going to school. Because not that I necessarily, I don't know, I don't hang out with like too many people.
Mhm.
But I do miss just kind of like interaction with people on a daily basis. And like when you go to the store, you know, you got to kind of like try and stay away from people, and, you know, and I don't know, it's good to be aware and to do that, to take precautions, but it just kind of is, to me, it's kind of sad. I don't know. I like connecting with people. I'm friendly. I like to smile and say hi to people and tell them to have a good day, or, you know, wish that they have a good day type of thing. So I don't know. I kind of just miss that aspect of
You.
everything.
Have a good day.
Yeah, and like when we see people, like if we go out for a walk, you know, normally like, you know, generally would like to say hello, and now you're kind of like, Lori, stay away from me. Are you sick? I don't
No,
want to talk to you.
some people are really like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's bad. It's
Yeah.
mixed. It's a mixed group. I don't know. A lot of people, I shelter in place, but I also do have to go to work like frequently and stuff. I do miss my mom. This opportunity was for me to go see my mom, but like
Mhm.
I can't because once I go to SoCal, like who knows if they're gonna be like, all right, lockdown, you can't go, you know, anywhere, and it's like, well, I have to go back to work and stuff. So I don't
Yeah.
know,
And we
but
don't want to like accidentally expose our family or loved ones to illness,
exactly.
right?
My mom, she works at the VA, so she sends me all the time like pictures of her in a mask, like pray for me, stuff like this. So
Yeah.
I'm just like, fuck, dude.
Stressful because we want to be there and like physically support other people, but doing that right now is very dangerous,
Yeah.
right?
My
Uh,
birthday is this Friday.
oh, really? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Happy
my dad.
Quarantine party? I'm sorry, not really. Get everybody on a Zoom call, have like 50 people. It's like, hello, I'm just kidding. I'll be at work, so
No. I know, you know, unfortunately, as we get older, we don't get to celebrate as much. Yeah.
It was my friend's birthday, and look, we had a quarantine party.
hey, hey,
That's cute.
Pretty
that's
fun.
tight.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Yeah, my dad's actually turning 75 next week, so I really wish I could be there, but you know, I gotta do what we gotta do.
Unfortunately.
We're okay. Okay, so thinking about groups some more. A group can be defined as two or more individuals who are connected to one another by either their social relationships, their location, or some sort of circumstance, right? And so these can be kind of like long lasting or temporary. Um, Additionally, there's mutual influence. So people in groups influence one another. And maybe people can be part of a group because they perceive themselves to be members of the same social category. Okay. So in groups, there's some sort of usually regular interaction, right? This could be virtual, this could be in person, and there's some sort of kind of shared identity, right? So their groups usually have kind of a sense of like we-ness, that enables the members to kind of identify with one another, that they kind of belong to some sort of group or entity, right? Let me copy this definition, so I can put this on the document that I'm going to show you. Maybe it'll work. Yeah, okay. So why are groups important? So groups are important for several reasons. One, they impact individual behavior and well-being, right? So people who kind of tend to be in groups that engage in healthy behavior, people in that group will have healthier behaviors, right? So if you have friends who like to exercise regularly, and actually a good way to keep yourself in kind of a regular exercise pattern is to have friends to exercise with, right? Or to say, okay, at this time we'll all be doing the same activity. Right now virtually, yeah, but like being part of a class, right? Like an online exercise class, or to have like a walking group, or friends who run or do competitive sports, right? you kind of like tend to motivate each other to engage in that behavior. Now, people, friends who may have issues with like unhealthy behaviors, perhaps like smoking, right? People who use tobacco kind of tend to do, like if their friends do it, they kind of tend to be more likely to do that. Or people who may have issues with being sedentary, or having issues with weight and health related to that. You kind of take on the maybe eating behaviors or eating patterns of your friends too. So if you have friends who are healthier, or eat healthier, you're more likely to do that. If you have friends who eat more unhealthily, groups kind of tend to have similar issues, right? Second, then they influence how we connect with larger society. So how we see ourselves fitting into the larger society usually is kind of, we go back to thinking about the group or community that we're in, and we situate ourselves in that group and we say, okay, this is how my group sees the world. This is how I see the world. Third, they help us to make decisions, right? So we kind of tend to make choices that go along with what people in our group would approve of, right? So maybe if you're in a romantic relationship, maybe you tend to think about, okay, what would my friends say in this situation? You know, that can really heavily influence things for you. Or maybe in terms of where you were deciding to go to school, anything like that, right? And then fourth, groups influence and shape society, right? So groups that people identify with can really influence political processes, how people vote, who runs for office, how people hold opinions about those who are in leadership roles, the types of laws or policies that they vote for, the types of opinions that they hold about certain groups in society are very much influenced by the group that they're a part of, right? Oh, okay, let me see if I can show you this visual and then take a look at my notes. This one? Yes. Okay, and I'll put this in the notes that I post online. So here's kind of my definition of groups. And this is kind of a way that you can think about groups being organized, right? So you have kind of the larger community that people are a part of. And then here, then that can branch off into different organizations, right? So they think about that as like a nation, a location, maybe a tribe of people, some sort of community group, or organization could be maybe a church. It could be a political party, could be a school, could be whatever it might be, right? And so those kind of larger organizations are broken up into smaller groups, right? So if you think about CSUMB, that could be the organization, and then a smaller group might be the major that you're a part of, or a club that you're a part of on campus. So maybe if you're an HCOM major, right, that could be a group, and then the group is made up of individual members, right? And then in a lot of cases, the members also kind of break up into smaller groups. So you have those who maybe are in leadership roles, or those who are more prominent in the group, and then other people who kind of tend to pair up because they have some sort of similarity, right? So I will post this on iLearn. Let's share here. Can I come back to my notes? Maybe. Okay. So people behave differently when they're in a group than if they would if they were alone, right? So people are more likely to go along with the norms of that group. So if the norms of the group are that they kind of follow some sort of authority figure, right? If more people in the group do that, everybody else will be more likely to do so. And when we look at groupthink, we'll kind of talk about that a bit. That'll be like in a couple classes. Okay. So also, like if they're in cults, which I think are really fascinating. Usually there's a charismatic leader in a cult. And if kind of the norm of the group is to go along with what that charismatic leader says, everybody will be more likely to do so. Doesn't mean everyone will go along with it, but they're more likely to if the group kind of tends to go in that direction. So I think a really important part of this is whatever group we're a part of, it really does change us as individuals, right? It does have a lot to do with how we make our day-to-day decisions, how we think about the world. It's very much shaped by the people that we associate with, okay? So like, people can be in a collective space together, but it's how we are connected to one another that can kind of make us like consider to be part of a group, right? So maybe a lot of you are back home with your families right now, and I'm sure that's probably good and also very stressful, right? So members of a family who live in the same house could be very much considered part of a group, right? And you're linked in multiple ways. So maybe you're linked by kind of shared responsibility or tasks that you need to carry out, a shared living space, maybe emotional bonds, maybe not, right? Genetic similarities or maybe not, right? So you're connected in multiple facets. Maybe your coworkers could be considered another group, because you're linked by the tasks that you have to carry out and kind of the purpose of the group, either to kind of serve customers, or if you work at a nonprofit, whatever the purpose of the nonprofit might be. And so you're kind of then connected in smaller groups based on networks of like close friends, or maybe people who like dislike each other. So I'm sure a lot of you work in places where everybody kind of, there's like a group of people that you hang out with, and then they kind of hate this other group of people. I don't know. Do any of you work in places, maybe somebody I haven't heard from, where people kind of have affiliations? It's like, oh, okay, this group is okay to be cool with, but the other group of people, we don't like them.
I think about a specific show that I'm watching right now.
Mhm.
It's called Vanderpump Rules. But anyways,
Oh.
yeah. But there is this one girl, her name's Stassi, and in the beginning of the show, she had like a clique of people, and they were like her like followers, like they needed to be this people, they needed to dislike these people. And one of her friends, her best friend, decided that like, I don't really want to dislike these people anymore, and she like lost it, and like and was like, no, I'm not being your friend anymore, you chose their side, I can't believe you did this. It was like this huge thing, and it was just it's just within a restaurant, so it's just like I guess personalities that were clashing or something, but that divide of these people was like a strict divide.
Yeah, it's either like you are aligned with me or you're against me, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, like that, and that can really like divide a workplace. And so if there's like a one group that really like is loyal to one person, if that person quits or gets fired, right, they may decide to leave because that other person is leaving too, right? I think that's happened on that show, hasn't it?
Yes, she ends up leaving the show for a while. She comes back. I'm back, and now they're all friends, which is kind of weird, but
Well, because they all want to be on the show, right?
they're all extremely successful now, so
I'm sure a lot of you guys, have you been watching Tiger King?
yes.
It's terrible, but it's interesting in thinking about group dynamics, right? So you have people who are followers or fans of Carol, right? Carol Baskin, and who really closely identify with each other. And so they kind of definitely motivate each other to kind of maybe attack people or to kind of feel very much aligned with who they follow. And then you have people who kind of follow some of the other groups like Joe Exotic or some of the other animal owners, right? And they will be very loyal to them as well. Interestingly though, one of the like tiger owners has a big connection to the Antle family here, you know, Tanamur and Antle. And he was born in Salinas, so his family is connected. Okay, let's see, where am I going? Get back to my notes here. Even like groups can be kind of very temporary. So you may have, say, people who are in line at the grocery store, right? Or in line at a store. So a lot of you like are working in places where maybe you're in retail or food service, or maybe like you're working in restaurants where you have to do everything to go now, right? So people, or if any of you work at Costco, like the lines there have been tremendous. So people who are in line, right, to go check out somewhere could also be considered to be part of a group. Even though it's a temporary group, that is still kind of a group because there's some part of their location that is connected, right? And usually it demands that they cooperate in some way, like everybody agrees, okay, we're gonna stand in line, right? They communicate in some way. Generally it includes patience, but I think right now people's patience is not what it normally would be, right? Okay, and then in terms of how you could like name groups, if there's a group that just has 2 members, right? So maybe 2 close friends or 2 sub-members of a larger group, they would be called a dyad. If there are 3 people in this group, it would be called a triad, right? So those are usually kind of subgroups of larger groups. But then you can also have really large groupings, right? So you may have people who are in crowds. So if you go to a concert, right, during that time that you're there, that's a group, right? Everybody's there to see a certain artist because they enjoy them, hopefully, right? People who are in church, right? If you go to a church service, that congregation there during that moment is a group, and then also going outside of that because people identify with that church. If you're at like a political rally, right, that can also be a group of people. But most groups tend to kind of be smaller in size, and so they may have like 2 to 7 members generally. As the groups get larger, they kind of become more complex and have more subgroups and are more kind of formally structured. So individuals in any group are considered networked, right? So the network meaning like they're connected in some way to one another. These connections could be emotional bonds that are strong, could be kind of cliques, right? They could be some sort of linkage between them. But some groups have really kind of weak linkages. These links can be really easily broken or easily torn apart. Maybe time can do that. Maybe some emotional event that happened that kind of tore people apart, that can break up groups, right? I'm sure some of you have been parts of friend groups where some sort of negative or traumatic event happened, and then people kind of split up, right? And form smaller groups from there. But people can even have weak links with one another and still kind of influence each other, or have maybe a connection for maybe a political campaign and then kind of break apart after that, right? Okay, now groups are different from categories. So a social category is when people share some sort of quality, maybe a personality trait. Maybe people who are like introverted could be considered categorized as introverts, but that does not mean that everybody who's an introvert is part of a group, right? You have to have some sort of identification to, like, people say, okay, this is me, I'm part of this group, right? If there's some sort of interpersonal connection, right? So if you have then, if somebody who's an introvert was on like an online forum for people who are introverts, that would be a group, right? Because they're choosing to be like a part of that. Let's see. I'm going to ask you all a question in a second. Oh, where was I at? Oh my God, my notes. Okay. So we have kind of like primary groups and secondary groups, right? So your primary groups are the groups that are really close to you, like they're kind of where you kind of find a basis of your identity in a lot of cases, right? So this could be family or really close friends, right? Or like your chosen family, right? If your family is not one that is like safe to be a part of or that you're normally a part of, we tend to kind of form really close friendships to substitute for that primary family group, right? So these kind of small long-term groups have more face-to-face interaction generally, and they're kind of more cohesive, and there's kind of more solidarity among the group. A lot of times people become part of a primary group involuntarily, right? So if you're born into a family, you're not really choosing that, you're born into it. A lot of times if you're raised in a religion, you're kind of, it's part of being a part of like your family or, you know, the group that you are born into. But then as we get older, then we tend to start joining other social groups, right? Within our primary groups, we kind of hopefully want to protect one another from harm, take care of one another if we get ill, right? So people who are in your primary group, you think of as the people that you can fall back on if you need them, right? They will help you in the most fundamental ways, hopefully, right? And then there are secondary groups. So this is kind of moved from primary up to secondary. So these are larger groups. They're more technically organized. They may last for a shorter period of time, and they may involve less emotions, right? For your primary groups, you usually have a lot more emotional ties. Even if you don't get along, like those emotional ties will kind of bind you with them. And then secondary groups kind of define how the individual places themselves within the social structure. So I would like you to think about the groups that you're a part of. You know, take a minute here, think about them and share some of these. So maybe people in general are born just into certain groups, and they may become a part of a group because of like their social surroundings or cultural surroundings. Or people may voluntarily join a group because they have shared beliefs or maybe a shared job or shared interests. And these all influence how we kind of see ourselves in the world. So just think about for, you know, not even a full minute, like a few seconds, what groups are you a part of? And then we'll kind of think of a list together. Okay. So could somebody share, what are some of the groups that you think you're a part of that maybe either you're born into or that you chose to join?
As far as being born into, I was born into a minority group, and I am part of the group of the black males in America because technically there's not many of us, but it is a quote unquote group. On a more like deeper scale, we're all part of the abled group, thankfully. But yeah, that's just a quick little brainstorm.
Yeah, those are definitely groups that you're that we're a part of and born into, and then issues that face certain groups, right? So like young African American males are faced with a lot of issues that other groups of people do not have to face, right? And so there are certain like risks or assumptions that are made about the group that people within the group are going to understand, right? Because they have to live with that day to day.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it's funny because people say they understand, but it's like you cannot. There's no way anybody can like think about being black in America unless you're black in America. Like you can try to like hypothesize or well hypothetically speaking, but like being black in America, like it's actually something you have to think about. Like damn, like everywhere you go, your actions, what you do, what you say, what you wear, how you dress. Oh, you don't have a haircut? Must be a bum. Like what? It's funny. So
Yeah, it's a lot of extra responsibility in terms of behavior, right? Because it's one, like not only would people in that group be judged by how individuals behave, but it people's health and safety, right? Like I know there were some groups that were recommending that people use a bandana, right, instead of a mask, and that could be really dangerous, right? As a like young African American male, you go out and you're wearing a bandana, people are going to assume very negative things and could harm people physically, right? They could shoot and kill people because of that, or arrest them or whatever, right? Make very negative assumptions. um, what are some other groups that you all are thinking of as well?
For me, I feel innately part of like the oldest child group because I have three younger siblings, and so I'm like the first to test run everything and like the first to go to college and things like that. And so I also feel a stronger responsibility like to take care of my siblings, and like I become like an like inborn like leader for my family in terms of like setting the tone with like, okay, we're gonna like listen to what mom says to do type of thing. And then at school, I'm on the Honor Student Union Programming Board, and that definitely has a group of people where like a lot of people at CSUMB like have specific changes that they're like, oh, I wish like the school would like get together and do this. But like that group is the group of people who like applied and then like ended up like being able to like respectfully listen to everyone who's like inputting. So like I transition a lot in that from like, oh, like I'm gonna put on this event to like, oh, I'm gonna like literally just go and talk to my friends about like what type of things they'd like to see. And then I used to do sports in high school. So like in high school, I was definitely a part of like the student athlete group, and like in middle school too. I feel
Yeah,
like
so teams and athletics, certainly. Yeah, those are a lot of groups. Like, and so thinking about all the groups that you named, right? We can be part of many groups, and there's what, I don't know how many, 6 billion people in the world, right? I think that there could be like that many groups, right? And being like the oldest, I'm the oldest in my family too. So there's a lot of responsibility around that, like placed on people. And interestingly, like when people get into romantic relationships, they tend to gravitate towards people who are the same kind of sibling order that they're in. So like people who are oldest tend to date each other. Youngest siblings also tend to date each other. Not within like the same family, but like because you kind of have lived under similar expectations or circumstances, and it brings out certain parts of your personalities, right? Yeah. Any other groups that you all can think of that you're part of?
I'm trying to find it for you guys right now to share the screen. If you guys look up, I believe it's like CSUMB Men's Club Volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see me. Yeah, I used to play for our school. I didn't play this semester because I have to work and stuff, but it was fortunate because all of this stuff started happening anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I have our schedule somewhere. Or actually, better yet, hold up one second. Um, where is it? Oh, I guess this would be the only one. Would it be? Okay, no, not that one. Hmm. Well, I guess. Here, this could be the only thing. I don't have my shorts or my jersey. But
Ah, yeah.
yeah, it's little Monty. I've actually played for the past 3 years, but
Wow.
yeah. But so I'm a part of athletes
Well, and
division
hopefully, like
2.
those of you, even though you can't play on teams right now together, that you can maintain connections with people that you did play with, right? And those can kind of help you get through the current time period. Yeah, so I guess that can kind of lead into my thought about these secondary groups, that there are what's called plan groups and emergent groups. So plan groups are groups that are deliberately formed by their members or by some external authority and have some sort of purpose, right? So like your volleyball group, right? That is a group that has come together because they want to play and they have a purpose to play, right? Emergent groups are ones that kind of come into existence spontaneously. So maybe groups that are in the same physical location or some that may form kind of gradually over time as people kind of find themselves interacting more often, right? So maybe if you're somebody who likes to go for a run on a trail, at a certain time of the day. Maybe you tend to see the same people there at that time. And it's like, hey, you're doing this too. Like you eventually will kind of come together, maybe, right? So it says people create plan groups, right? But they often find emergent groups. So you may find that you have something in common with other people. Okay, so I'm going to get into this kind of last part of my discussion about groups. I know I've been talking a lot, so how do groups kind of interact with each other, right? They may discuss things, they may make decisions together, they may kind of share emotional reactions to things. And there's kind of two kind of main class or two type of group interactions. So you have task interaction and then you have relationship interaction. So task interaction is where people have a goal, right? Maybe a certain project that they need to work on. So like if you're assigned to do group work, right? That is a group that has a task that is attached to them. They may have a certain goal that they're working towards, right? So this means people within the group must coordinate and they must kind of pool their skills together to make decisions and to take action, right? Then you have relationship interactions. So this is where group members kind of relate to or influence the emotional and interpersonal bonds within the group. So these may be through like positive actions that include social support, caring for one another, empathy. It could also include like criticism or conflict or other negative kind of reactions. So some actions will help a group accomplish their goals in terms of relationship interaction, and some will not. Some may get in the way, right? But often these kind of relationship interactions sustain emotional bonds that link people to one another. Okay, so group members are kind of organized in kind of patterns that seem to be kind of predictable. And the ways that they make decisions kind of go along with those patterns. So we'll look at how that works. I'm going to show you an image in a second. So groups kind of are structured usually around certain roles and norms. And so a role is kind of the set of behaviors that are expected of people who have a certain position within the group, right? So maybe somebody who's a leader in the group has expectations around how to lead, right? Or people who are members or followers of a group may have expectations about how to behave in that role, right? And so you have people kind of fall into certain patterns within any group. And then you also have norms, right? So norms are kind of the standards around, yes, around which we kind of expect people to behave or to kind of perform in a certain context. So what is the expected behavior of the group? Is the group one that everybody's expected to be kind of quiet and compliant? Or is it a group where people are expected to be really loud and verbally interactive, right? And then the goals are kind of what the kind of task is that the group is working towards, right? The outcome that they're working towards. These may be either generating tasks, maybe coming up with ideas, brainstorming, could be choosing, maybe making a decision. It could be negotiating and coordinating between groups and executing that, maybe carrying out a task, right? So if you're in a group doing group work, maybe the end task is to create a paper together or to do a presentation. That's executing, like, so you have to get through these steps to get there. So let's look at the steps. Let me see, hopefully I can have my notes up at the same time. Let me see if I can show this to you. Share my screen. Okay, so maybe you guys can see this. So I'm going to kind of talk about each of these steps, hopefully. Yes. Okay. So first, there is forming, right? Yes, I'm following along with this correctly. Okay, so forming is kind of the first stage in what happens in the life of a group. This is when people come together, they form a group, right? So you have individuals that kind of converge, right? So this may be them kind of finding this affiliation together. They may be given or assigned a task together, or people who are like, hey, I'm concerned about this. Me too. Like, let's work together, right? So it's making the decision to come together. And then the next step is storming, right? So storming is when you have this larger group that comes together, and then you have people who kind of like tend to pair off into dyads or triads, right? Who kind of form smaller friendships, or like, oh, you're somebody I can trust. I'm going to kind of talk to you more and ask you questions about this assignment than somebody else. So you kind of seek out familiar or similar individuals and kind of start sharing a little bit more with them. And so that, like, we want to feel somebody that we're connected to rather than just being kind of in like just this large group of people. And so this can create kind of subgroups within a group. It can differentiate some, it can help, or it can actually make some tension. Like we talked about, like with Vanderpump Rules, right? You have these groups to kind of form. People may kind of pair off. And this is also maybe where groups might tend to kind of jockey for who's going to be in a leadership position. There may be somebody who wants to lead and somebody else, and they may start to kind of conflict around that. And then we have norming, right? So norming is the third stage in which the group kind of comes up with its kind of patterns of how people behave. So this is where expectations are kind of set out about how people are going to communicate with one another, what kind of responsibilities they're going to take on, how hierarchy is kind of determined at this point, you know, who's in leadership positions and who is kind of a member of the group. And so this is where kind of the group identity really kind of tends to form, because people are now knowing what's expected of them. Okay, and then we have the performing stage, right? So in the performing stage, this is where the group is now functioning, hopefully, right? And they're working on this task that they have to carry out. So if you're in a group and the group is doing research, this is where you're conducting that research and maybe hopefully helping each other out with that. This is also, maybe there's pressure to maintain those norms of behavior. And so the group is kind of trying to get something accomplished. And so that's where they're working to get it accomplished. And then they come together and hopefully do it, right? Maybe to decide on a policy that needs to be voted on, or voting on that policy, right? So this is where they're carrying out their task. And then after this, you have adjourning, right? So if it's a temporary group, like if you're working on a group project together, or if you're assigned to carry out a project at work, right? Once that task is completed, then usually the group adjourns. I mean, you may still have connections with people who are in that group, but the task of the group is done. And so the group kind of now can fade back into whatever original group that people were part of. So they disband, right? And this is also where people kind of assess how things went, right? Do they feel happy about what took place? Did they feel kind of unhappy about that? And there can even be kind of mourning, right? If you were part of a group that was really worked well together and things were really productive, once it's over, it's kind of like, oh, we're not part of this anymore, right? If you're part of a team, again, I always think of like sports or team behavior, and your season is done, and now that like your season is done, then everybody kind of goes their own separate ways, or people graduate or whatnot. If it's in college, then that can be, certainly there's a sense of mourning there. I would say too, like with us having to do social distancing and carrying out classes online, there's certainly a sense of mourning that we're not physically together anymore. I know I've really felt that very much so. And I realized how important it was to kind of see people, face to face in class. And I definitely felt a sense of mourning about that. Okay, let's see. Do you all have any questions around this? How do I end sharing? Thoughts? No?
Oh,
Yes.
was the one before norming with the electric shock, was that like tension between the group?
Yeah, so within storming, so you have forming, you have the group kind of come together. Let me share this again. Where are my notes? So you have forming where the group comes together, and then you have storming. So once the group comes together, then everybody kind of starts to like jockey for who's in charge.
Right, because
Right.
from my description, like everybody's an individual at that point before they become a group.
Yeah, and so you're
Yeah.
going to have people's individual tendencies. There's a lot of birds outside my window. Sorry, I'm looking at them. So they have like tendencies in terms of their own personality. And so you have maybe several people in a group who really have strong personalities and kind of try and rise to the top, but they're kind of fighting with each other for like who's going to be in charge, right? I don't know, do any of you have like pets, like groups of like chickens at home? Like when I grew up, we had a bunch of chickens. Anybody grow up on a farm? Okay, I don't know if you all have heard the term pecking order, right? So that comes from thinking about flocks of birds, especially chickens, because what happens is like people, I think in this storming phase are like chickens, because what happens is chickens will literally peck one another and try to get some other like strong-willed chickens to submit so then they can be in charge. And if they see blood, right, if chickens see the color red, they really like kind of go crazy and will peck more. Like they see a weakness and they will like attack it more, and they may even kill the other chicken. I've seen that happen, right? But they do that because they're kind of like, I want to show you who's in charge. Now I'm in charge and I'm the head chicken, right? Goats kind of do similar things. They want to like be on top physically of one another to show that they're dominant.
Oh, wow.
Let me pull this up.
Josh said he lived on a farm.
For grade school. So Joshua, did you have any chickens or goats or other animals that you noticed that behavior in?
We had a lot of things. Mostly it was a dog kennel, and the most we ever got to were we bred like toy breeds. The most we ever got to was like 50, I think.
Wow.
But besides that, we did have a whole chicken coop with like a bunch of different ones, maybe like 30 different chickens, and then we had goats back then. Now it's sheep. I hear my mom has over there. I don't live there. That's why most of it I lived on most of grade school. But horses, a lot of horses, like 10, 12, and
Mm.
goats and sheep,
Did you notice?
chickens. Yeah.
Did you notice any of this behavior in any of the animals that you had?
Yeah. Goats do that pecking order. Chickens have a pecking order. Dogs have a pecking order. All the animals have pecking order.
Yeah, and so like
Even,
dogs.
even the horses.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I didn't grow up around horses, so you're gonna have horses who are kind of
Yeah,
the.
horses are weird. They don't like other horses eating around them.
Oh, yeah, they're very defensive about that, huh?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Actually, like I mentioned, there's a lot of birds that I've been paying it because I'm home and I see the birds a lot. There's a hummingbird feeder that I'm watching right now, and it's changed a few times over the past like few weeks. Whoever the dominant male is, he'll find this certain perch, and they all end up sitting in the same perch when they're kind of in charge. Whoever the in charge male is at the time, he will
Yeah,
sit.
whoever is the in charge, the the big chicken. I forget it. Anyway, he always has all the hens around him. Whoever that is,
Yeah.
like even if it's like 10 hens, always has all the hens around him.
Yeah, because it's whoever has kind of the most authority in the group is going to have the most access to the women and decide who, the female chickens or, whoever it may be, and decides who gets to protect them, but also who gets to mate with them and stuff, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So it has to do with like access to women or, females, right, for reproduction. But yeah, they'll like guard food sources very much. So like the hummingbird here who'll perch, like he'll chase off other ones, like they'll fight with each other, right, to do that. I'm sure you noticed that like with the horses, with dogs too. Dogs become very protective of their food, and they'll maybe allow or not allow other dogs to be near the food source at any certain time. So that territoriality is definitely kind of like the storming phase, right? It's kind of like who is dominant enough to kind of rise to the top, right? Not necessarily it's always the people with the best qualities, right? Sometimes people rise to the top when they do not have the best qualities, but for whatever reason, they're kind of more dominant in that situation. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions around groups?
I would say fish. Fish are kind of like that too.
That's
like
true.
for sure.
Yeah. Like if you have aquarium and you have fish who will like hide in certain places, they're kind of the quieter fish that like just come out when they have to. And then you have the dominant ones, right, who will kind of patrol the tank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely.
The cats that used to live outside, like in my like little area that I live in, they were actually very territorial. You would hear them fighting most nights.
Oh wow. Were
Yeah.
these like people's house cats or were they stray
Yeah,
cats?
it was people's house cats.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, but all of that's kind of died down because some of them like passed away, so there's only like this one that's been around, and then they just kind of fallen into the care of a different family, so they kind of get along with this other cat that those people have. So
And I wonder if like the older cat is now kind of the dominant one, right? Doesn't have to compete with as many other cats.
Yeah, definitely. He kind of just does what he wants.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, too, like kind of I don't know, unrelated or related. Like, so people aren't outside as much now or out in public spaces, and so a lot of animals have kind of retaken over these spaces, right? And in the cities, like I've seen a lot of videos with like in San Francisco itself, like packs of coyotes have been going out into the city and just roaming around, right? And they closed some trails, I think, because the coyotes are pupping right now. I have a bunch of coyotes like near where I live here in Schoonover Park, but they can be very aggressive towards like other pets or animals, right? Because they're territorial about protecting their pups and protecting their space. So yeah, like there's definitely a hierarchy there, and that would be kind of like the storming. Yes. Okay. Great. Well, I guess we're kind of like at the end of the notes that I had. I would recommend, so I will post some of these notes up on iLearn for you to kind of help remember what we had discussed. And I would recommend follow the link and listen to the This American Life piece from Lindy West, where she talked to her troll over the phone. And complete your communication activity plans. I made a note to myself, so hopefully I will remember to post an example for you all if you would like that. Do you guys feel like you want an example or not?
Yes, please.
Yes? Okay.
Literally what she said, word for word.
Okay. I will try to sit down and do that now and post it for you all. So keep an eye on iLearn. And I hope that you all are taking care of yourself as much as you can. Try to get rest if you're able. Try to find some creative outlet or get outdoors when the weather is okay. Stretch and exercise and just take care of yourselves, okay? And if you're out there working, please be safe. Wash your face and hands as much as possible. Oh, gloves, yes, very good. And get rid of the gloves when you're done using them so you aren't tempted to reuse them. Okay, and if you have any questions, if you all need anything at any point, please reach out to me, okay? All right, well, I miss seeing you all in person, but thank you for being here. And we will have class again next week, okay? And then just keep an eye on iLearn. I'm going to post I'll record a lesson around empathic listening because that'll be important for you to kind of think about and practice, and that goes along with our next class. So I'll be doing that sometime over the weekend. I'll let you know when it's up, okay? Okay, bye all. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Bye.
Uh,
Bye.
Later.